Hi, Ami. Good evening. Welcome to everyone. Yes. Good evening, Ami.
Good evening. Yes, you can hear me properly, right?
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me properly?
Yes, the audio is a little on the lower side. I can hear you.
Uh,
Nice to see. Hi, Aditi. Hi, Sumi. Thank you for joining.
I'll try speaking louder. Is this better?
Yeah, this is better. Yeah, I'm audible to you.
Yes, very well, actually.
I'll just wait for a minute or so. More people are joining. Right. Actually, it's pretty amazing, realignment of the stars. If you see, right, Preeti tried connecting with you about a month back, but because you were in the US and the time zone difference, you couldn't connect. And
Yeah,
today we are connecting on Vyasa Purnima, right?
exactly.
It's unbelievable. So that's the
Yeah.
power of these texts. That's why we hold them in such high esteem. That Sri Ramayana and Mahabharata, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
no, it's amazing, and it's this time the Vyas Purnima Tithi is over 2 days, right? It was yesterday and today,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
over 2 days I could do satsanga, if I could say, on Mahabharat on Vyas Purnima. I mean, it's really a blessing, I have to say. Can't be anything less than that.
Right, right. Absolutely. Ami, if I could bother you a little bit more for the volume, I think it's better, but I'm not sure if it's the rest of friends who joined. It's good for them. Try now.
Um, I don't know how to increase the volume. For me,
It's all right.
I'm at the numbers.
The volume is okay. It's not
Okay.
bad, but I'm just wondering if it's fine. Okay.
Can people who've joined, can you guys hear me properly?
Yeah, I'm just going to request people like Shaurya or Aditya or Divya who are, can you just message us saying if the volume pickup is good from both of us? Okay. Uh,
Okay, good.
yeah, okay, fine. Okay, great, thanks. Because then it's just possibly me. Okay, great. Without further ado, we'll start. And on this holy occasion, I'd like to first seek the blessings of Vyasa Rishi. So I'll say व्यासाय विष्णुरूपाय व्यासरूपाय विष्णवे नमो वै ब्रह्मनिधये वासिष्ठाय नमो नमः. Uh, Thank you, Ami, for giving us this time. For those who joined, Ami is a computer science engineer. I'm Ahmedabad alumna, a management consultant, and now a first-time author. Congrats on your first book. And the name of the book is Mahabharata Unraveled. You know, the lesser known facets of a very well known history, right? Um,
Yes.
so, uh,
Thank
yes,
you.
yay. Yeah. Anyway, I was also going to, when we put it up on Instagram, I'll give the Amazon link to buy as well, and when we put it up on YouTube, it's amazing that you've taken this effort. You've taken some time off your corporate career and gone off the beaten path to focus on doing this. I mean, you could have written a fictional novel, but you chose to write this, and that's going to be the first question, which is, what were your childhood influences? The atmosphere that you grew up in, your influences growing up that led you to this path. I mean, it's not every day that you're going to write a book on the Mahabharata, right? If you could just take us through the arc that led you to this point in life.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Srinivas. Thank you, Preeti, and thank you, Kriya, for having me today. It's amazing to be on a platform of a company which calls itself Dharmic. Yeah, so Dharmic entrepreneurship. That's quite something. And maybe at some point, I'd like to hear from you what exactly was in your mind
Sure.
when you called yourself that. Yeah. Um, so before I start, Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Um, the journey to here, let's say it happened, but it was not planned. It was not as if I was thinking about writing Mahabharata and it happened. Uh, it happened because of the lockdown, I have to say,
Right.
because I had already quit my job. I had come back to India last April, and it was complete lockdown since April, right? And they were playing Mahabharata they reran Mahabharata, V.R. Chopra Mahabharata. And it's a lovely series. I've grown up on that. That's where I think a lot of us have really learned about Mahabharata. But this time, as they were playing the series, having started to read Mahabharata before, through the journey of learning Sanskrit, I realized that a lot of what they show, not lots, but there are parts which they show are not in the actual text, in the actual Mahabharata. So I would just put up some posts about it. And my friend, Praveen Tiwari, who's a publisher with Bloomsbury, he suggested that there's so much written about Mahabharata, there's so much fiction written, which is all great fiction, yeah. People take perspectives of individual characters and they just make a story around it based on Mahabharata. But in that, what has happened is that what is in Mahabharata is sort of forgotten, and we all have our favorites, and there are fights over who's better than whom and all of that. Yeah. So he said, why don't you write something about this? So that's how Mahabharata happened. So that's the reason why Mahabharata. Now, coming up to Mahabharata, I think it was because I was reading Mahabharata in my effort to study Sanskrit and understand the text in their own, for what they are.
So this effort to read Sanskrit happened before lockdown, or it was during lockdown?
Oh, 10 years. I mean, I think sincere effort since 2013, 2014. Before that, I was interested, but sincere effort since 2013 onwards, yeah. And it was more because of yoga. So my mother was deep into yoga even when we were younger, yeah, when we were in our school days. And as a kid, we used to have a gymkhana near where I live, and we used to go and play sports and do gymnastics and stuff and learn yoga as a part of it. But it was always asana, yeah, it was always exercise. So around 2009, 2010, I was in Gurgaon at that time working with Bain, and because of some stupid thing, but now if I think of it, it was meant to be, I fell down and I hurt my back. Yeah. And it was not really a big accident, but somehow the way I had hurt, that I was pretty much not able to move or walk because it had really hurt my back. Thankfully, it was only a muscle thing, but it had really impacted. And my mom, and I couldn't work out or anything at that point. And, you know, there are these periods when you're younger, when you always want to be thin and you want to work out and sweat it out. And the only way you think you can remain fit is to sweat it out. So I was very unhappy that I couldn't gym anymore and stuff. And my mom would be like, तुझे तो आता है, you know Surya Namaskar, you know asanas, why don't you give it a shot? Dhire dhire try that, do pranayam. And I'd be like, no mama, you don't understand, it's so boring. Yeah, it's boring, you don't sweat. How am I ever going to be fit just doing it, you know? And somehow, I think I was so ignorant about what yoga is that I was like, I kept denying when she used to tell me before. But this time I had no choice because I couldn't do anything else. And in general, work stress and all that, I was not in a very happy space at that point mentally. So I said, chalo mama bol rahe hain, so let me try it. And I started with Surya Namaskar and then added more asana and then added more pranayam. And over a period of 6 months, it was almost magical, and not magical only in terms of how my back was feeling, but magical in terms of how I was feeling. So the whole, you know, sometimes when they say when mysteries have to come together, mysteries usually come together. And that was the phase when even mentally I was very stressed out. But after 6 months of continuous practice, it was a change in me, in the way the situation was still the same, but the way I was reacting was different. And I was like, okay, I was a little more calm, little more patient, little more tolerant of what was happening around me, and that then impacted the way I behaved with people as well, right? And in general, things started improving, and it was like, what happened? Aisa kya hua? So the only change in life was this. So I said, chalo, let's try and understand more. So I tried to read the translations of the Yoga Shastras. I said, let's go back to the text and let's read. So I remember getting a translation of Patanjali Yoga Sutra, and I'm going through it, and I'm like, okay, maybe I deepen my practice and I add more asanas. So I'm trying to look for asanas in Patanjali Yoga Sutra, and I'm like, there is no asana in this. There's so much given, but there's no asana. There's only this one line of what an asana is, Thiram Sukham Asana, and that's it. And I'm like, arey, ye kya hai? So then I realized that yoga is so much more And just even the translation of Patanjali Yoga Sutra, I'm like, this is not exercise. This is a psychology. This is a mental science. This is about how you think. It's related to that. But of course, it made some sense, but not everything. Not that I understood everything. So then that led me to read a little bit of Sanskrit. I said, chalo, I want to read this in Sanskrit. So I started learning a Sanskrit a little bit. Then I was reading other texts, then understood why it's important to read our own text in Sanskrit. And I picked up one other text trying to understand Nyaya. And I think that trying to read Nyaya actually accelerated my efforts to read Sanskrit. And I'll tell you why. This book on Nyaya, again, I was reading a translation, but with the Sanskrit translation. And by that time, I had started picking up a little Sanskrit because school mein kiya tha. We'd done that in school, so I had some understanding. And there was about different kinds of arguments in Vad, Vivad, Vitanda, all of that, where one explanation was that you make an argument, or the person makes an argument related to the jati. So using jati references, you make an argument, and that is called something. Yeah. So it made sense to me. Yeah, it made sense to me when I read a little bit of Sanskrit. But then when I read the translation of it, the guy says only a person of the same caste can do this debate. And I'm like, no, the jati does not mean caste here. Yeah, it means the same category of things, giving the same example from same category. So if you're talking about a tree, you give the example from the plant kingdom, something of that sort. So isme jati kidhar se beech mein aa gaya. So I tried and I said, pata nahi yaar, I don't know, maybe he's right. So I tried to get a Hindi translation. And Hindi translation was actually what I had understood, because for us who know Indian languages, we know that one word can have many meanings, and the context was very clear what it meant. And then I'm like, hi Ram, this is ridiculous, right? Completely unrelated, Nyaya, discussions of debate, and the translator got in jati from somewhere, caste from somewhere. And then it comes down to, oh, Hindus are very casteist. Because same caste guy only can argue with one another, no? Then, so complete narrative change. Whereas the meaning was quite something else. So I said, oh, this is not working. If I need to do or learn or whatever, I need to start understanding Sanskrit more. Yeah. So that's how the Sanskrit studying started. Now, what I also realized is that I'm too old to learn Vyakaran and everything in detail. So I started actually reading the text. So Patanjali Yoga Sutra, Gita, of course, Gita pehle bhi thoda padha tha. And I realized that reading it either in Sanskrit Hindi or Sanskrit Gujarati made a lot more sense to me. Yeah.
Right.
So that way, then I picked up Mahabharata, because Mahabharata, I think since the serial has happened, or maybe before that, I don't know, people have always had discussions around Mahabharata. It is one topic which just grips you. Yeah, it just, once you are into it, it doesn't leave you, because it's all about human psychology. Somewhere we see ourselves in those characters, and we see the aspects of those characters in us. So people become very passionate about it. And I said, chalo, let's see what exactly is in Mahabharata, because a lot of things you hear, you read different versions and this and that, and you're like, it doesn't make sense. Somewhere they'll tell you that Karna is this superhero and he was victimized and stuff, but then you also see that his behavior has been so bad towards Draupadi. So there is no consistency in the character. Same thing goes with, say, Yudhishthira. He's called Dharmaraja, but all we know about him that he's taking away his wife indiscriminately. Yeah. Very sissy, doesn't ever want to fight, always is running away from fighting, and his brothers, he's there just because of brothers. Still, he's called the Dharmaraja. It doesn't make sense, right? Why is that so? So for my own sake, to get answers to some of those, I started reading Gita Press Mahabharata, the Sanskrit Hindi Mahabharata, in, I think, 2016, 2017 onwards. So that's how then that eventually culminated into the book this year. Or rather, the writing happened last year. So yeah.
Okay. So I mean,
reading products down the plan.
Very fascinating, long, complex, arc. It's like a mini Mahabharata itself, your own story of how you came. But it's also in a way meant to happen, because whether we know it or not, as Indians growing up in this dharmic land, Mahabharata in a sense is a story of us as Indians. It's our story, right? It's like we are like a fish in the ocean of Mahabharata. Whether we like it or not, we are in this land of Mahabharata. And the other thing is that, of course, yoga has become so famous, and Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, rightly so, is very famous. But honestly, it can be said that the Bhagavad Gita is the ultimate yoga text, even though
Absolutely.
it doesn't talk about a single asana there or barely anything about asana pranayama, but all the chapters are yoga of this and yoga of that, and 18 adhyas of yoga are there. So it is no doubt that when you start doing asana to cure a backache, you went to Patanjali Yoga Sutras, and the Antaryami brought you to this point saying, I need this book written, because ultimately someone else is getting this book written through you one day, right? So very, very fascinating things that you've connected. And one interesting point, which I can relate to a lot is I don't have knowledge of Sanskrit. I'm trying to increase, my understanding of our scriptures and the dharmic, systems that we have. Is that I know I can read Sanskrit, but when I read the English translation, I know that there are too many interpolations, mistakes, and biases of the author. Whether they are, intentional or not, the author's biases come in, which is why you made a very fascinating point that when you read it, the Anuvad in Hindi or Gujarati, they, do a very good job of, translating the Sanskrit for your language. So if you know your mother tongue very well, if you're very comfortable in your mother tongue, and for those for whom, like me, English is the main language, Sanskrit to English is what I depend upon, and it's a very, very difficult journey. Just curious, Mahabharata is the largest known body of work, about 1.2 lakh shlokas. How many volumes is the Gita Press book?
6. Without the Harivamsha. Yeah, so it does not have the Harivamsha. Right? The Harivamsha part is not there. So the 6 volumes of pre-Harivamsha part. Yeah.
So could I say that that's the version, and were there any critical editions that you, because the main problem as we'll come to and why your book exists is that there has to be something which is, we can say, is what Vedavyasa said, right? And not anybody else, right? So what did you rely upon?
So I used Gita Press as my key reference book, but I referred to the Bhandarkar Oriental Critical Edition because that is the full critical edition that we have, and the K.M. Ganguly translation. I think that comes from the Bengal edition, which is an older version, even before Gauri. While there are different versions, so what Bhandarkar Oriental has done is a humongous task. Yeah? They have taken some 1,259 manuscripts and gone shloka by shloka and seen where which shlokas are in maximum of these manuscripts. Yeah, and according to that, so if a shloka exists in quite some of them, then it makes sense. If it is just in 1 or 2 of them, then it probably is an interpolation. Yeah? And then they use the mistakes and all that.
Right.
Yes. So that is Gauri. However, Gita Press is not. So Gita Press has more verses than Gauri. Yeah. What Gita Press has done is actually even more interesting. So they have also referred. So Gita Press version is based on a commentary written by Neelkantha Chaturdhar, who was a Maharashtrian Pandit living in Varanasi, I think in the 17th or 18th century. Yeah. So based on Neelkantha version, Gita Press has been written, and Neelkantha at his time might have referred to different versions to come up with a more consistent story of Mahabharata. But what Gita Press has done is that they've taken the Neelkantha version and they've also taken the Dakshinatya, so the southern rendition of Mahabharata. Now the southern rendition of Mahabharata, which also consists of many manuscripts based on which it is edited now, the story is not different. So the core story is not different. There might be some differences here and there in events, but it has a lot more details which you don't find in other manuscripts. So what Gita Press has done is that some of those interesting data points which are not in the Neelkantha commentary, they have added to the book, but not given it shlok numbers. So you know this is from the Dakshinatya part. Yeah, so you can very well know. It comes in the regular storyline, but without the shlok number. So everywhere else it will be like shlok number 1, 2, 3, 4. But then after that, if they've added some shlok from the Dakshinatya reading, there will not be any numbers to it. And I'll give you an example. Details like what kind of details? In the Neelkantha version or Bori or anybody, they do not have the ages of Pandavas mentioned anywhere. But in the Dakshinatya reading, they actually say that when Pandu died, Arjuna was 14 years old. Yeah. So some small details like that. Now what I have done is wherever I thought it was a little more interesting, I've added those. So
Right.
things like Dakshinatya reading has where was Mahabharata written. Yeah. So today, if you go to Badrinath, so 3 kilometers further from Badrinath in Uttarakhand, there is this place called Mara. And in Mara, even today, so I went there in 2019. There is this gufa which is called the Vyasa Gufa, and then there is a Ganesh Gufa, and
Right.
everybody there believes that this is where actually the Mahabharata was written, and actually the Saraswati also used to flow
Right.
there, but now it's Lupta. Yeah. So this information that Himvata that this Mahabharata was written in at the feet of Himvata comes from Dakshinatya reading, which is not in the Nilkant. So some of these things I've added, but also clearly called out in the notes that this is from Dakshinatya reading.
Right.
So yeah, so this is why. So reference I've used is Gita Press, also because I did not want English to affect my language when I translate or when I write this book. That was the key reason to use Gita Press.
Yeah, this is a very, very complex and fascinating thing, because in the south, if you see in the Dvaita Sampradaya, Sri Madhvacharya is there. And Sri Madhvacharya, when he has not gotten to, they believe Madhvacharya that his followers that we went from Udupi and joined his Acharya Sri Veda Vyasa, and he's there in the Vyasa Gufa there. So Vyasa and Madhvacharya are there currently, and he is, of course, I don't belong to Dvaita Sampradaya, but they can explain better. So I'm saying it's a very complex thing, right? In South also, people think that this, broadly think of Kurukshetra, Hastinapur, etc., right? But in the South, you have this connection where this great Acharya of the Dvaita Sampradaya, he has joined his Acharya Vyasa. So one day he was reading the Aitreya Upanishad in the Udupi temple with his, at one particular shloka, he told his students, now I'm going to join Veda Vyasa, and he just left from the very spot, just flowers left. Wow. So that cave is where it is. So probably, it's very, out of this dimension of the five senses that we're talking about, Sri Veda Vyasa and those people. So it's a very complex, interconnected history of, this Bharata Varsha, which is, I really wanted to, get because I think this context that you've given is very, very invaluable in itself, because this brings me to the point of the book, right? So two obvious questions here. One is, one or two interesting, kathas, which you have said, the lesser known kathas. And then obviously I'll come to the next are those common misnomers which people think happened, right? Which actually did not happen and which are not substantiated by scholars or people who actually, read this holy text. So first is, from your book, what were some of the most fascinating, one or two fascinating episodes that you like to share here? That the lesser known facets, that is.
So, as you rightly said, there are the way the book is written. It's not as if this is a myth, this is debunking of it. It's not like that. Some places where I thought it was important, especially in the Draupadi's part, there I have. Others I have just written the story, and I think from that it would be evident what is and what isn't. Yeah, and I have given notes in the background. But some of the lesser known stories, yeah. So most of the stories would be known. What would not be known are the details or the discussions or why a certain thing was done in a certain way. And I'll tell you one story which I personally write. This is between Arjun and Krishna. So this is on the 17th day of the war, and Karn is now the Senapati because Dronacharya. So Karn had become the Senapati on the 15th day after Dronacharya fell. But on the 16th day, he couldn't kill Arjun. So the war was still going on. The 17th day, and Duryodhan was very upset that, Arey, nothing is happening. I thought you will kill them, but even today, Yudhishthira is not captured. Arjun is not killed. So Karna is like, no, you don't worry. I'm going to end this war today. I'm going to kill Arjun. And he's all set and he goes to the battlefield. And that day, he's actually so driven that he comes face to face with Nakul, Sahadev. He defeats them in a one-on-one. Doesn't kill them, but he defeats them. He comes face to face with Bhim, but Bhim he cannot defeat. Yeah, so with that, then he retreats. So both of them retreat. None of them kill each other, and then he comes face to face with Yudhishthir. Now he managed to injure Yudhishthir quite a bit. So Yudhishthir then goes back to his camp because he's very hurt and he's very pained that I was so badly injured by this person. So he goes back to his camp to rest before coming back to the war. Now when Bhim and Arjun, they don't see Yudhishthir, they're very worried. Let's hope कि सब ठीक है ना. So Bhim says, Arjun, you go, you just check on Yudhishthir, see if everything is fine, and I'll take care of the front, of the war front. So Arjun and Krishna, they go to see Yudhishthir. Now, when Yudhishthir sees Arjun coming, he is like, "Arey, this means Karna is dead. Definitely, otherwise Arjun will not leave and come the battlefield, right? It's not possible." So Arjun comes and Yudhishthir is like, "Wow, I'm so happy. I'm so proud. You've defeated Karna." And Arjun's like, "Arey, no, I've not defeated Karna. I've only come to see you. Ki sab theek hai na? He's not defeated yet. I'll go back. I was taking care of some other yoddhas at that time." And hearing that, because Yudhishthir is already so much in physical and mental pain, he's like, "Oh my God, what kind of a warrior are you without really doing what you should do?" And there are other episodes. So this you will see in the book, some other episodes, why Yudhishthir also feels that Arjun is not doing what he must do. Yeah. So he's like, "Oh my God, who leaves a war like that to his brothers and you're just coming here? And I know why you've come here. You are scared of Karna. You don't want to kill him. You cannot kill him. That is why you've come here to see me. And now you're giving all these bahanas that you came to see me. What is the use of your Gandiva if you can't even take care of Karna?
Right.
I thought you will kill Karna. Yeah? So give your Gandiva to somebody else. Give your Gandiva to Krishna. Give your Gandiva. If Abhimanyu was alive, he would have taken care." So he goes and he says all these Parusha, really very stinging words to Arjun. So Arjun is listening, and then he brings out his sword and he runs towards Yudhishthir. And Krishna is like, "Oh, hold on. What's up? What are you up to?" And Arjun is like, "Yudhishthir told me to give away my Gandiva to others. Now I have taken an oath. And to myself, I have taken an oath that whoever says something like this to my sword, to my Gandiva, to my bow, I will kill that person. So now I have to kill that because this is my oath. Kshatriya, I'm a Kshatriya. I cannot go back on my oath. So now I have no choice, but I have to kill Yudhishthir." And Krishna says, "Hold on. What dharma are you talking about?" So he's like, "No, it's my dharma. Now I have to kill him. Kshatriya dharma." He's like, "What dharma? Do you know what dharma even means?" And he's like, at some point, Balen eva, like a kid, Balen eva vrutam tutam. You took a oath like a bala, like a young kid, and now morkhyat, like a stupid person. Out of your stupidity, you want to do adharma. Adharma vipasasi. You want to do this adharma of killing your brother just because of some real stupid oath. These are the words he uses. He said murkhyat. He calls him, "You're stupid. Stupid like a kid, you took this oath. And now to fulfill, you are saying, I will stay strong on this oath." So this is not correct. And then there is this whole discussion, on how Krishna explains what is dharma and what is adharma. Yeah. When should one stick to something he's thought before, and when should one realize what is more practical and pragmatic at that point in time? And he gives a certain example. So I'm not going to disclose what example he gives to actually convince Arjun that he's wrong. Yeah. Anyway, so then he gives a way to Arjun to get out. And he's like, in Atharva Veda, there is this sukta that if somebody who's very respectable, if you insult that person and if you call him tu, so it's like, in Hindi, we have aap and tu. Tu is,
Right.
Aap is respectable and tu is not, right?
And
Similarly, in Sanskrit, it is tvam and bhavan. So if you're calling bhavan is respectable and tvam is like tu. Yeah. So bhavati is respectable for women and tvam is just tu. So he says, if you call him tu, you are already insulting him because he's your elder brother and a king and he deserves the respect. Yeah. So now you say that and insult him and it's evil. Yeah. So this is how he convinces. But this whole discussion about what is dharma, what is not dharma, it makes so much sense. And through that one episode, we see the difference between Vishnumati, that is coming from Krishna, and the behavior of others. You then weigh this incident against that of Bhishma, against that of Gandhari, who have, for that one oath, are willing to go and fight the war. Right or not is not their concern. Yeah, dharma or adharma is not the concern. But I have that oath, that's my pivot in life, I will live it.
They're defined by that oath.
Exactly. So this it was very sukshma understanding of dharma that he gives. Achha, now that doesn't mean it's convenience, yeah? Because Arjun shouldn't kill Yudhishthir, so it's okay. But everybody else, no. He explains what are the situations during which it's okay, or rather during which you should consider what is the better of the two, yeah, where dharma comes into play and where it is adharma. In this case, he explains that Yudhishthir has done nothing bad to you, yeah. He's himself in pain. He's not even carrying his weapons. So if you kill him in this situation, it is ahimsa, is himsa at the end of the day. Yeah? So you are going to do a himsa, which is anyways adharma, just to keep this stupid oath of yours. And this is how he explains.
Wow.
Now, what this also shows, Srinivas, is that the humility of Arjun. Yeah? He's such a big warrior. And there are many times during the war where Krishna actually screams at him. Even during the Jayadratha, when he says that, oh, I'm going to kill Jayadratha tomorrow before sunset. He's like, are you stupid? Did you consult your brothers before you took an oath like this? Did you consult me? And you announced it. Now you've already made your opponents beware. You want them that you're going to do this. So all they're trying to do tomorrow is trying to ensure you can't kill Jayadratha and the war is over, right? So how stupid can you be? Of course, eventually Jayadratha killed. But the thing is that actually Krishna many a time screams at Arjun for behaving not as he should or behaving impulsively. And Arjun takes that humbly. On the other side, Karna is completely opposite. Anytime anybody tries to put any sense into him or tell him where he's good or bad, he's like, Arey, how can you tell me this? Yeah.
Right.
He becomes extremely defensive. He becomes offensive. He starts screaming at the other person. He starts insulting them. Yeah. So when you see the two characters, this thing comes out, the humility versus the arrogance. That arrogance could be because of insecurity or whatever. Yeah. So this is one of the kathas that I thought was interesting.
Wow. I mean, I'm sure you could talk a lot more about this. In a little bit, I'm reminded of how when Vali has been killed by Lord Sri Rama and he's dying, in his last moment, he asks saying, did you not? And the long explanation Lord gives of how, I can kill you. Because he said, you didn't come face to face with me. I was having a duel with my brother and you kill me, from behind. And that whole explanation gives of dharma versus adharma. Reminds me a little bit of that where the Lord in an earlier avatar says that. What is most incredible is that, and I'll come to the bit that you spoke about very well, is that Lord directly is talking about dharma, what to apply. It's not a question of convenience. It's a sophisticated understanding of life and how to, conduct yourself is what's happening. It's very deep. It's very nuanced. It's not like you said, the very nice word is, it's not convenience. Basically, aaj ye nahi karunga, kal ye dharma, aaj no. Dharma part is fixed. How you understand it and how you uphold dharma is fascinating. And to hear it directly from the Supreme Godhead is of course, gives it that sanctity that I too can do this. What I like about this is that nobody's tried to tell you something, but you've learned a lot. See, by going through this,
exactly.
It's not like it's a story, but it happened like this. But by getting deep into the Itihasa, not just the superficial plot line, 18-day war, 5 of these Pandavas, 100 other, Kauravas, and that's just the plot line. But only if you go into the actual shlokas and how it happened, you realize at the end of it, you've learned, I'm not going to, you explained a very big concept. I'm not going to lower it by saying that, reminds me of my boss when I was working and how he shouted at me. And I'm not going to bring it that level, but instinctively I can apply it to a couple of office situations, right? Yeah. And it's just so amazing.
If I can interrupt you here, right? You made a very interesting point that without telling, they are explaining the nuances.
Right.
That is why we have the Itihas. We have the Indian knowledge system is so huge. We have the Shruti, which is Ved Upanishad. We have the Smritis, where we have Dharma Shastras, which are lot of do's and don'ts. Then we have Itihas Puran. But why do we have Itihas and why just these two, right? Why Ramayana and Mahabharata? Now, Itihas, as we understand, normal translation is history. But the way the definition of Itihas is, like as it happened or does it happen, that is the etymological meaning. But the definition of Itihas that is given to us, Vachaspatyam says, Dharma Artha Kama Mokshanam Upadesha Samanvitam Purva Vrittam Kathayuktam Itihasam Prachakshate. That which had happened before, Purva Vrittam, which is narrated in a katha form because it used to be oral transmission. People have to get it easily. If it is too complex, people won't relate to it. Yeah. So sometimes it also has an allegorical feel to it. So Kathayuktam. And it has a purpose to tell us, to teach us, to leave us with the wisdom of Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Basically, the 4 Purusharthas of life, which simply means how should we live our lives. Now, when Upadesh is given like, ye karo, ye na karo, ye karo, wo na karo, that's one way, right? But what lot of common people like us don't know is how to apply it, right? How should we deal with a Dharma Sankat in our life? Because at the end of the day, we have many roles that we play in the society, right? And many times, our commitments are in conflict. Our priorities come in conflict. in those situations, in those dharma sankats, in those ethical dilemmas, how should we behave? Itihas shows us through the story, through the actual things that happened in the past, and through how people were guided and what impact their decisions eventually had, how to take that decision. So how to develop our Vivek Buddhi to come to a decision for any dharma sankat that we have. Yeah. Now, what is important for that? For that, if we want to get the correct message, we have to know the story at least in the originalist form that is possible. Yeah.
Right.
What happens is that there's so much confusion created by somebody's understanding of Karna, somebody's understanding of Draupadi, that when you eventually sit down and analyze what you want to learn out of it, you don't, because it's also muddled up. It makes no sense. But if you go back to even Gita Press or Bori editions of Mahabharata that they have done, the characters are very consistent.
Right.
The understanding comes without anybody having to say.
Right.
Yeah. So that's also why importance of understanding Itihas the way it is.
Right. Also, this is why I think historically, for all these thousands of years, both these texts, Sri Ramayana and Mahabharata, have been used for Nitya Parayana and Swadhyaya at home by the elders, and why you have the Pauranikas and the people coming and having a Navaha, Saptaha of Bhagavata at home. They come and read it and all of that, because somewhere, and it took me a long time to understand that these are not epics or storybooks or things that you can make comics from, or legend or whatever it is, right? That these are actually holy texts, right? Because it's called, like everyone says, the fifth Veda. The Mahabharata is called, or the Ramayana is is called as the avatar of the four Vedas itself, because Lord Sri Rama comes, the Vedas also took an avatar along with him, right, on earth. And so that's why, like you said, that you have to apply yourself and and go to the source version and make I would say a sincere effort. I wouldn't want to take it any level higher than even sincerely apply yourself and read it with intent. The text keeps on revealing and guiding. It's there, like you said. No one is trying to tell you, but it's not like they're trying to give you case studies or they're trying to give you morals, or like how self-help books take a subject and do it, right? So it's not like that, but that's why it is so incredible that this manual for life has been given by God Himself, but He's not calling it a manual, right? I think in the end, when He got really desperate, the people go, "Samajh mein nahi aa raha," say, "Okay, let me give you Bhagavad Gita separately. Let me give you the unclaimed notes, right? Baad mein, agar you can't read 1.2 lakh shlokas, please ye to pad lo, 600 odd shlokas, right?" So
So you're very right, Srinivas. In Mahabharata itself, there are whatever wisdom we get in Gita, right? Regarding karma, regarding how should we do action, vagere vagere. It comes in so many places. We have this Uddharet Atmanam. So that shloka, like Atmaiva Atma Bandhu Atma Ripu, that part, that comes before also.
Right.
Vidur says it, Bhishma says it in some other way, yeah? So all this understanding of karma is also there. Draupadi says it, Kunti says it. But eventually, just to bring all that together, we have the Bhagavad Gita.
Right. Also, on a sidebar, now that you mentioned, does the Vidura Niti also come from the collected sayings of Vidura through Mahabharata? That's how the Vidura Niti text has come?
Yes, yes. So, there are multiple instances in Mahabharata where Dhritarashtra has called Vidur. Yeah, so there is... there are many, but one of this is that he's very upset because now it seems like the war is definitely going to happen, and he is very upset that now what is going to happen? Yeah, I can't sleep at night. So he calls Vidur and says, "I can't sleep at night. Why do you think this is happening?" Yeah. So he says, "No, talk to me about dharma. I like what you tell me. I can't sleep at night, so you tell me." And Vidur says, there are 4 people who can't sleep at night. One who's kami, one who does enmity with somebody who's much more stronger than them, a chore, or somebody who is guilty or who's taken away somebody else's stuff. Right? I hope you don't belong to any of those 4. So indirectly he's telling him why you are afraid. Yeah, he's telling him why you're afraid. And then he goes on to propound a lot of things on work, on project management, on dharma, adharma, all of that. So that part is in Vidur Niti. And then there are some other instances before as well, where Vidur tells him that you'll find a lot of people who are going to talk to you very sweet words. Yeah, that's Sulabha Vakta Rajan Nitya Priya Vadiraha. So that comes in Sri Ramayana also, that comes in Mahabharata also. That you'll find a lot of Vaktas who will say what you like. But Apriyasya tu Pathasya, but the one who speaks Apriya, which you don't like, but that is good for you. Vakta Shrota cha Durlabha. You don't even have speakers who will tell you like that. especially to a king. And there are very few people who can take that kind of criticism or feedback in the right sense. But I care for you. I care
Right.
for your unnati. So I will always say the truth. I will always
Right.
say that which is good for you. And then again, he propounds his niti. So that is why Vidur, Yudhishthir is called the Dharmaraj. So he's called the Putra of Dharma. Yeah.
Right.
Vidur, we are told, is actually Dharma incarnate.
All right.
So, yeah. So he's like Krishna is the Vishnu avatar. Dharma, Yamadev or Dharmaraj, he had some curse and he takes Janma as Vidur. That's what we are told. But even if, say, somebody doesn't want to believe in avatar or avatar, doesn't matter. I think even for a Laukik understanding, there is so much, yeah? Because everyday life we have to live and we have learnings from Mahabharata about that.
Absolutely. I mean, so many situations that you can apply in life and work and all of that, right? Coming to the next question, there could be so many, but as an author of this text, one or two very common misnomers that are floating around that ki aisa hua Mahabharat mein, which never happened, or I would say misinterpretations. I know it's a tough subject, but we should sometime talk about, because this is our history and we should take ownership of it as Indians, right? Something that that is a pet peeve as an author of this book.
Okay, so I'll tell you 2-3 instances because some of those instances actually made me say yes when Praveen said that take this book up. Yeah. So one is just this, that a lot of people think, and this was told to me by somebody very nice. Yeah, he said, "Oh, Mahabharata is fascinating, but it's a North Indian story. South Indians can't connect to it because there is no South Indian connection." And I was like, "Oh my God, that's so not true. If you see throughout Mahabharata, you have mention of the South, and not just mention, there are interactions with the South, with the kingdoms in the South." Sorry. You have Malayadhwaj, who's a Pandya king. He participates in the war. Arjun Chitrangada, whom Arjun marries when he's on a 12-year pilgrimage. So she's from Manipur. Now we think Manipur today is in the northeast, but the Manipur of Mahabharata is not in the northeast. It is beyond Kalinga. So down where probably today Visakhapatnam is, or maybe before that. Yeah. So between Orissa, Andhra Pradesh. That is also south. In pilgrimage he comes down. Sahadev comes down. When the Rajsuya Yagna happens, you have kings from south also who are participating.
Right.
So it's very fascinating that somebody might think that, and it's nobody's fault, right? 1 lakh shloka text, it's not easy for everybody to read. Our information generally comes from what we've seen or heard. And there, the focus is mainly on the story. So these details are not discussed. But that's not true. So I have one chapter which focuses on the geographical extent of the war and Mahabharata. Yeah? Wow. To say that this understanding of Bharat Varsha, it is not a British construct. India is not a British construct. We have always had this identification and understanding of the underlying unity of Dharma. That's one. The second thing, Karn, yeah? So Karn is this anti-hero who everybody thinks is this big victim of caste oppression, and, everybody wants to do justice to Karna. It's very interesting. He's a Suta Putra, and people assume that Suta Putra is something bad, or it is it is an insult. Okay. Now, let's see who Sutas are. Suta is a mixed caste. Now, you see a lot of mixed jatis. You have even Manusmriti, even Arthashastra lists out mixed jatis. Yeah. So there was a lot of intermingling of jatis, and Suta actually comes in the top. So Kshatriya father and Brahman mother.
Right.
That is a Suta. So the community of this kind of intermingling gives rise to Suta. Just in the book, there is this one error which has crept in where I wrote Ulta and the oversight didn't pick it. So page number 17, just note to the readers, mark that. But in any case, it's a Brahman Kshatriya mixed caste.
Right.
Okay. So one, to make him an icon of caste discrimination is completely misplaced. Because he is not. Nowhere except that one instance when he gate crashes into this performance show of the Pandavas and Kauravas, and he says, "Oh, Dvandvam Ichhami Arjunen Saha." Out of nowhere, he just wants a duel. Yeah, That's the only time when Bhim gets upset and he says, "Oh, you are a Suta, you go ride the chariot." Yeah. But
Right.
after that, nowhere else has he been discriminated for being of a different caste or a lower caste or whatever, because he's not. Yeah.
Right.
So it's that itself is mistake. Now, Jati is another topic. I'm not getting into it. Just Karna related stuff. Yeah. So just that to understand, he's not caste discriminated victim. There
Right.
might be others. He's definitely not. The other thing about Karna usually is that Dronacharya refused to take him as a student
Right.
because he is against Suta. Now that also is wrong because he was the Dronacharya's student. Just to glamorize and evoke that sympathy for Karna, I think people have gone out and made these stories about him. He was Dronacharya's student. Only when he insisted that he wants to learn the Brahmastra. And why? Because he always had this competition with Arjun, who was much younger. Yeah, and Arjun wouldn't care. Arjun was just busy studying, and he was just this nerdy person on the warfare side. So, and Karna wanted to learn the Brahmastra. So Dronacharya said, "I'm not teaching you the Brahmastra. You are not the right adhikari for it, not now." Yeah, so not teaching you. So he's saying, "No, but I want to learn, so I will go and learn it from other teachers." And he goes to Parshuram. So a couple of things about Karna. Draupadi. Other thing, Draupadi in Mahabharata is a beautiful character.
Right.
But somehow in the serial and stuff, she's always shown this angry person who laughs when Duryodhan falls. And we have this Andhe ka putra Andha, right? He blind when son is blind. This is not in Mahabharata. This is, I don't know where it comes from, but definitely not in any version of Mahabharata. She's not even there. Yeah. At some point, Duryodhan says, "Oh, she was there," but during the actual scene happening, she's not there. So a lot of times people say, "Oh, whatever happened to her was justified because she was so arrogant and insulting." Yeah, बंदे का ego hurt हो गया, तो उसने वस्त्र हरण कर दिया. Of course, that is pretty stupid. Anyways, it's not a justification. But somehow, by adding this to her character, she was made this person who was also very grey, and it was okay, like हो जाता है. So that is not there. Again, the other thing, she's shown to be really cruel, who says, "I want to wash my hair with Dushasan's blood." This is also not there. She doesn't say anything like that. Her hair is also not open. It is tied and all that. A reference to this comes from an ancient play called Vedi Samhara. Even in that, she's not saying you bring blood for me. She only says that I will tie my hair after Duryodhan and Dushasana kill. And after Bhim kills them, he comes with his blood-soaked hands and he's like, "I will tie your hair with this blood." Yeah. So somewhere this is a natya. This is a dramatization of Bhattanarayan, I think, who'd written Vedi Samhara. So a lot of this fictionalization and adding their own instance is not a new thing. So we can't say कि आज के ज़माने में ये हो रहा है. This has been happening before also for natya presentation, yeah, to make it more interesting, more glamorous. So these are a couple of things about Draupadi. So.
Very interesting things that you mentioned now. Draupadi, actually, the character that we know today from watching TV serials or reading these kind of interpreting very bad. Actually, in fact, I do remember there was a place, I don't know, you know the reference better, is that she gives a lecture on Stri Dharma, Draupadi.
Yes.
It's a very, if you read that and you understand the position of women in society then, and it's mind-blowing. I mean, if this is Stri Dharma, I mean, oh my God, okay, and it's so complex, it's so deep, and it's so extraordinary, right? And so the person that is and the women of society then were so different, right? And it's, if only more people could read that, and that's something that perhaps you could think of in future.
So I'll talk a little bit about this. The way she says it is through her own life. So she's in the forest and Krishna and Satyabhama, they come to visit her. And Satyabhama asks her that, tell me your Vashikaran mantra. Yeah, so Vashikaran mantra is that you do some mantrochara, some tantra thing to keep your husband in your control. Yeah? She's like, because I have just one husband, Krishna, and I can't keep him in my control. You have these 5 husbands and they can't, they are always in your awe. Yeah, every day, the way they look at you, the way they talk to you, I can see this love dripping from their eyes and respect dripping from their eyes for you. What Vashikaran have you done on them? Yeah, what jadoo, kya jadoo chalaya hai? And she says, "Arey, koi jadoo nahi chalaya hai." And she says, "Let me tell you the role I played when I was the queen of Indraprastha." Yeah, and the kind of role, so it's basically her role was the chief admin officer, the chief officer of the entire palace administration. Yeah,
Right.
including taking care of treasury, cattle, horses, all of that, managing all the workers who came there, managing guests. It's a palace, so you can imagine. So she was the one actually running and managing the entire palace, not just household. This we are talking about a
Right.
creation thing, and
Right.
so that is why Draupadi is what she is, and her the respect Pandavas have for them comes out when towards the end there are many places you can very well see Pandavas respect her, but in the end when Krishna is dead and Arjun meets Vasudev and he's helping them, take the women away. He tells Vasudev that now with Krishna gone, I think our time has also come. And he says now we should also go because without Krishna we are all incomplete. And he says Krishna, Draupadi, and we five Pandavas. We are like different bodies but having the same Atma. Now think about it. He's saying this about Draupadi. So what kind of a lady she would have been, right? They all have they have different wives. All of them have multiple wives. Yeah. But the respect, the bhav they have for Draupadi is just something else. And that is because of her character, which I think is not always properly represented in the retellings or even the teleseries or whatever.
And just to add a little bit about this North Indian, South Indian thing, I don't want to get too much into it, but I'm based in Chennai and, not very far away from the very, very ancient Lord Parthasarathi Swami temple, where he gives darshan as Geetacharyan. And if you know how the Tamil, Bhakti saints, the Arvas, they have, talked about Lord Parthasarathi. The temple is, the latest Arva saint was there 4,500 years ago. Some of the early ones were 7,000 years ago. But he is always known as Lord Parthasarathi here, and he's known as Geetacharyan here. And, should, when you're in Chennai, have darshan. So why are we worshipping Lord Parthasarathi in the heart of Chennai if it's south? Where is this North Indian, South Indian thing, right? Exactly, right? So it is absurd. And people will tell you it's a 600 or 700 or 800-year temple, but if you know the traditional dating from internal evidence, it's the latest person who have gone there was at least 4,500 years ago. So it's very complex history, and he's very close to where I'm based out right now. So very fascinating and the more we know about it, we get a better understanding of who we are, as a people, and it's really amazing. And they don't come across as weak characters or they just, Draupadi is only for only one or two things, the whole thing, but this such a, strong and complex character, almost you could say the end of it, a divine person, right? She's also known as Krishna because of her complexion and luster, and, she's also known as Krishna, right? Draupadi is known as Krishna for other reasons as well, right? So it's pretty amazing, right? I know, we could go a lot, but there are a couple of more questions that I don't know how you're doing for time, but I think this is a very good discussion. And here I want to ask a couple of things. This process of writing the book has taken maybe a year or so. Anything that you could share on how writing this book on Mahabharata Unraveled has transformed you as a person? Anything that when you started the project, it took about a year or so, if I'm right?
Because I was not working, I had taken a break, as I told you. So I wrote for 4 months at a stretch. And when I say wrote, literally like 12 to 15 hours every day for 4 months, including weekends. Yeah, I must have taken a day here and there off. So I was just writing. Because I had the time, I had the luxury. I think with working and stuff, it's not always possible. But I think for me, even though I had read Paths before, I knew some stories, Miss Thomas. I think Miss Thomas is one thing, but just understanding the profound wisdom that comes out through the different discussions in people amongst the characters is very, very enlightening, if I may say. And one of the strongest character that came out, or rather, the way I saw Yudhishthir has changed drastically. And in fact, there is a lot we all can learn from Yudhishthir, yeah? Because we are faced with so many situations in life where we either want instant gratification. Somebody does wrong to us, we want to immediately, undo that and scream at that person and do bad to that person or whatever. But through Yudhishthir, we learn that being impulsive is not always the right strategy. Sometimes the right strategy is to wait it out. And while you are waiting it out, don't forget your goal. That is there, but you have to ensure that before you go towards that, you have to be well prepared. You have to be so well prepared that when the actual situation comes, you're going to win it. But to get to that requires a lot of patience. Lot of people around you will think you are a sissy, you are incompetent, but to stick to it with patience, listening to everything, and still taking your family on the path where eventually nobody can where eventually you stay on the right side of history. Yeah, so much injustice happened to them. Even then, till the end, they said that war is still not the best option.
Right.
Yeah, we have to keep negotiating. We have to keep negotiating till so that we can avoid a war. See, this war, Mahabharat war that happened, it was not trivial. 2 generations got wiped out. 2 entire generations of warrior, actually 3 generations of warrior got wiped out. Nobody, there were the whole Bharat Varsha probably was only of widows at that time, and the young kids and old people. Yeah, so it was a disastrous war. To take a decision like that requires a lot of moral responsibility.
Right.
So even if you live with a little bit of injustice, it's okay to avoid if you can avoid a war like that. And they said, okay, you give us only 5, give only 5 villages. Yeah, we will still be okay. And Krishna is with him in this decision. Huh? The other, you give 5 villages, we'll still be okay. You keep Indraprastha. But Duryodhan is Duryodhan. He's like, I cannot survive with these people. He's like, Tikshreya Suchya Vyadhet Bhumehe. Yeah, Vyadhet Agrane Bhumehe. Like, even this much of land, which can be, which a point of the needle can be placed on, even that much I will not give them. I cannot survive with them. I want to fight them. Yeah,
Right.
and hence eventually when nothing worked, then there is a limit to how much injustice can you take, because then that is not sustainable. Dharma is dharayate iti dharma, dharnate dharma uchyate, one that sustains and upholds. Injustice can never last long. It can only create more injustice. So at certain point you have to then put your foot down, and that's when the war happens. That's when eventually they agree to do this war. So by waiting it out, by giving it time, by through his patience, and through that all that while he's not sitting idle. He sent Arjun to get the Divyastra from so that they are well prepared for the war, right? So to be Yudhishthir is probably the most difficult part in Mahabharata. That's what I felt like. That was my biggest uh, not learning, even if I mean, so how should you deal with life? Yeah, when you are faced with such a situation, and patience matters for whatever people tell you. Yeah? So that was one of the key things, apart from others, of course, the first story that I told you about understanding dharma. So that there is a lot of clarity in my head now. Yeah, I can understand the characters better. I think I can understand Ramayan better. Of course, now I'm also doing Ramayana reading. Every Sunday we do Valmiki Ramayana reading. We have a small group. So just understanding situations, putting things in context has become so much clear now. Yeah, than it was before. Otherwise, ये सही है, ये गलत है. उसने ऐसे क्यों किया? इसलिए किया, वो गलत है. But unfortunately, life is not so easy, and even our own lives, right? Deal with it that 2 options that we are faced with might not be the best options, and you still have to choose. Yeah, they might not be the ideal options. You still have to choose, keeping in mind which is a dharmic decision. Now, dharmic decision is the one which will let you survive and thrive sustainably. Yeah. So not to say I have learned decision making life. No, that's a big claim. Not going there, but at least I think this is what I learned, and this is what I hope we all learn from Mahabharata, because what even the text says, that what is the use of this itihas? Itihasa pradiptena mogha avarana bhatina. The avarana of moha, the ignorance that shrouds us, that gets dispelled through this itihas. Yeah. So again, I would say, I would of course love if people read this book, which I have tried to be as honest to the original, or whatever we call original Vyasa's Mahabharata. But eventually, if this inspires people to actually go back and read the Mahabharata,
Right.
I think that would be quite something.
No, I was anyway. You preempted that one, because I was saying that this is going to be a great stepping stone in reclaim. Because see, however it is, when people go, it's fine, right? It's a stepping stone to going back to the original text and understanding this, And the very nice thing that you said that, how the war happened despite so many negotiations as a very last option, right? And out of sheer desperation, when Duryodhana said he won't give him the point of head of a needle, land won't give him all of that, right? But also as people living in difficult times, right? You can also say this is a text of hope, right? That the Lord is saying that if dharma gets or the situation gets very unbearable, right? So Sambhavami Yuge Yuge, he will come and help. So it's also a text of hope. It's not it's not just the war is it's not what should I say, a dystopian future or something like that. It's a text of hope. And the amazing thing which you said, which is one big takeaway for me, is that it dispels ignorance, right? That's what a Dharma Shastra text does, right? It dispels ignorance, right? And it's the very last thing that you expect when you're reading a story. Because also called the greatest story ever told, but in the end, it's dispelling ignorance, right? And showing you the truth. I mean, it's the layers are too many here to fathom in one shot. So it's great. It's a very nice thing. I do believe that people who read your book would be absolutely said, what am I doing, not reading the original? I'm sure they're going to go back. That's definitely going to happen.
That's
right? I really believe in that. So, which bring any other book ideas that have sprung forth? I know it's already just in the first 2 weeks. Are there any other books that are fermenting?
I hope there is Anugraha and I can do something on Ramayana as well. Because I think Ramayana is another text which is more misunderstood than understood. People take 1 or 2 instances and they are like, they throw the baby out of the bath water along with the water and all that. And I think Ram's life is a lot more than those instances. Again, the same thing. He did certain things. How did he make those decisions is what we need to learn. And that comes to the original text. Yeah. Sometimes what happens is that we just look at the incident, the situations that happened, and we take our call, aise hua, waise hua. Or what has happened is through other bhakti literature, everything is that, oh, he's Bhagwan, so he's done it, and so it's fine. Yeah, I think either way of reading it is a little lazy if we want to use itihas as mokha varan khatina. Yeah, because again, Valmiki ji tells us very clearly, like you said, the Vali thing, right? Ram explains why he did what he did. Now that one may agree with or not agree with is a different thing, but at least it makes you think. Right? It makes you think why certain things have to be done when they have to be done. Again, sometimes you are faced with 2 situations, both are bad, and you still have to choose. This is right. Yeah. So I think there's a lot to learn from Mahabharata, from Ramayana as well. So if there's Krishna Anugraha, hopefully that will happen. And I think there's a lot more in Mahabharata as well. So right now I have not gone deep into any of the discourses. So be it Vidurniti, be it the parts of Shanti Parva, Anushasan Parva, which are more discourses, yeah, ki kya karna chahiye, kya nahi, more going towards the Dharma Shastra part. But there are parts in that which are also very interesting. So let's see. And I hope if people who've read this, they have any ideas and they'd like me to write or something on those lines, I'd be open to that as well. So
something amazing is going to come out of this, because it is, because as I did read many of your blog posts as well, and you've chosen the appropriate Dharmo Rakshati Rakshitaha, is that as you try and do the best that you can to uphold Dharma as you know it best, Dharma obviously gives you much more and protects you as well. So I'm sure many interesting things are going to come as a result of this effort that you've taken. And very interestingly is that we wanted to also, how initially we thought of contacting you was that, obviously you connected with Preeti on the alumni networks, I Am Alumni Network and all of that. That we were trying to understand, this happened a little earlier when we went back into a second wave lockdown in early May. We were trying to do a series on how Ayurveda can help, right? And how Dharma Shastras can, how we can cope with lockdown. Physical practices, yoga, Ayurveda, Dharma Shastra, and you cannot ignore. See, what is the number one thing people are talking in this COVID thing is, apart from the disease itself, is mental health, right? That's the big thing, right? Correct. And the whole thing comes back to our Dharma Shastras, right? They help you with spiritual development. They will be with you. They will carry you through life, right? And we're trying to get also, apart from the physical aspect, the Ayurveda aspect, also the dharmic aspect. And in Ayurveda also, they say very clearly, the Acharyas, Charaka, Acharya, Sushruta, they say that you have to go for a vocation, that helps you uphold dharma, that helps you go on the path of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. They say it in a textbook of medicine, they say only if you follow the purusharthas properly, you have the right vocation, will you have peace of mind. And it can even be linked to having harmony and balance in life, right? Both mental states as well as your physical doshas. Only when they're in harmony, you will have good health, right? So if you're going to be doing a parayana or a study of Gita through a satsang, you can still, we say, I know it may sound a little species, but you can have good skin and hair also, because ultimately the whole thing is about finding balance in life, doing the right things, and that's what even good health in Ayurveda is, right? Do dinacharya, when to get up, when to have snana, when to do work, how to rest properly, how to eat. So the whole thing is, they look at it as, your dharma is also to your body, to do your dinacharya. They look at your dinacharya as a dharma and not as, if you do this, is a hack for greater. They don't look at anything as how to hack health, right? So, all our texts, and of
Actually,
course,
that reminds me to us, the way they talk about Sharir, right? They say, Sharira eva khalu dharma sadhanam. So this
yes.
Sharir is your instrument to do dharma only. And if you do dharma, sustainability will happen. Physical, mental, social, everything.
And in our sampradaya, we say that it's only through this sharira that you get sambandham of your acharya, and through that acharya, you can have union with Krishna. So take good care, because it's the body that gives you the connection, this human birth that gives you connection with the supreme creator, right? So they said the body is very important because it is not just, flesh and bones, it's so much more, and it's a starting point. So that's one of the reasons why when we heard about a book coming out, and we also read your blog a little bit earlier as well, that there will be a very interesting discussion for people even who are looking at us as a company that makes Ayurvedic products. So why should we be talking about this most divine dharmic textbook, which what you say in the introduction to your book, right? It's a dharma shastra. What I mean, dharma is the starting point, right? This is the text of dharma. So it's been I think it's a little over an hour. I know that you must be pressed for time, and it's a very, very fascinating discussion. One of the things I could see in the comments that many people have asked for two things. One is your book available abroad? Because I know you're on Kindle, but many people still like a hard copy.
Yeah.
So
I think US it is available now. US it is available. Kindle everywhere, but US also hard copies are available. So if you go to Amazon.com, you
some
might
people
see that there is one in stock, two in stock. But if you just say you want to buy it, they will keep replenishing it.
And the other question also is that recommendations for good editions of like the text that you can read. So what I will do is we'll put this up on the Instagram feed and tag you. And so if you can reply to the people reading that, seeing the post can see two things: the link to buy the book, and also the recommendations like Gita Press, etc. If you can add in the comment to the post, so people will know it'll be there. Because that's a very common thing. So what are the references that I can do to deepen my study?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ami. I know there's so much more to discuss. Maybe we should do another live, sometime later, a few months later, once you have more experience of how the book is, been received, etc. It's been incredible. Thank you so much for being generous with your time and sharing your experiences of this book. We at Kriya and everyone, here, wish you the very best for this book, and hope that many more books, such dharmic books, come out of your writing. And now that I mentioned Lord Parthasarathy, I would like to conclude with the benediction, the Mangala Shlokam of Lord Parthasarathy of Chennai, which says, Vrindharanya Nivasaya, Balarama Anujaya Cha, Rukmini Prananathaya, Parthasudhaya Mangalam, Sarvam Sri Krishnarpanam Mastu.
Shri Krishna.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's been an amazing discussion. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for, listening in. Thanks to everyone who joined in. And what I'll do now is there is an option to record this. So I'll record this and